Hello, everybody. It is Wednesday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined for the Wednesday episode of the North Shore Drive podcast by Christopher Carter, our Steelers insider. We're going to be talking about Steelers running backs, specifically Kenneth Gainwell after his huge game the other day. What should his role be with Jaylen Warren, assuming Jaylen Warren is healthy again real soon? What has he observed of Kaleb Johnson? We're also going to get into the defensive backs. Is Joey Porter possibly a little bit underrated given what he's showing in his peripheral stats? How has he benefited from the changes in the secondary? And what's the staying power of these individual contributors who've stepped up? James Pierre, Jalen Ramsey at his safety spot, Kyle Duggar at a safety spot, who all made some big plays this weekend. We're going to get into all that. Before we do, we want to remind you that the show is presented by FanDuel. We also want to thank Edgar, Snyder, and Associates. When you've been hurt on the job, who decides when you're better? Who decides when your treatment is over? Who decides when your benefits are over? The answer might surprise you. Insurance company doctors do. How does that make you feel? If the answer is not great, call Edgar, Snyder, and Associates today at 1-800-94-EDGAR. They'll fight for the work comp rights you deserve. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Okay, Chris, Kenneth Gainwell. He was great the other day in the backfield. He's been pretty solid in his occasional rushing production that we've seen. He's obviously been the second horse there alongside Jaylen Warren, but when called upon, he was great in Dublin. When called upon Sunday in the second half of the game against the Bengals, he was great. He's shown up for them when they've needed him to, but Jaylen Warren's also having a nice season. So what is the correct balance in terms of usage for those two? Do the Steelers already have it, or is there something else you'd like to see in terms of how they're handling these two guys in particular?
I think it's a tricky balance for the Steelers because it is very clear from talking to Mike Tomlin that the Steelers believe that they want to have Jaylen Warren at its best. You cannot have him as an every down back or someone that you load up with touches the way they did for Najee Harris for several years. And listen, I've had this theory for a while, like since back when Najee Harris was with the Steelers, that Jaylen Warren, I think, is the more explosive back, the more dangerous home run back, but he is not a guy just with his build that you want running the ball all the time because of his build and because of the way that he runs. Jaylen Warren is not a Barry Sanders type back or a speed back where he's just, or like Darren Sproles, where his whole thing is he's going to make you miss. He's going to be faster than you, and you're not going to get your hands on him. It's kind of what Kenneth Gainwell is. Kenneth Gainwell is a lot like a Darren Sproles type where he's going to he's not going to have a whole lot of big contact unless it's like he's in a tight situation where they got to get 1 or 2 yards and you have to plunge forward. But a lot of Kenneth Gainwell's yards come from him working in space, being faster to the point of attack than you, and making you miss out in that space. Jaylen Warren does that, but also runs through you. And like, that's the other part of his game that's really impressive. Like, Jaylen Warren has 32 missed tackles forced, according to Pro Football Focus. Like, he makes guys miss, and some of that he runs through tackles, and that's great. But at the same time, that's the kind of stuff that wears you down. And in fact, that those 32 missed tackles forced is 8th most among players in the NFL right now. But that wears you down. And so I think what the Steelers are trying to do is they're trying to preserve Jaylen Warren so that he can be a playmaker for them, especially late in the season. And Kenneth Gainwell could come in and also be a playmaker for you. Because that's the other thing. Kenneth Gainwell is no slouch. He gets open, especially in the passing game. He gets open. I think he might have better hands than Jaylen Warren. You saw the 2 one-handed grabs that he had on Sunday. And I think it's trying to balance those skill sets because Jaylen Warren is a bad man, but Kenneth Gainwell showing that he is also. And so you got to find creative ways to get both of them on the field in situations where they can both be playmakers.
Najee Harris had a lot of fans in this town. Chris, there was a lot of conversation about, will the Steelers keep him? Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan go the other direction. They put this backfield together with Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell in those lead spots. Do you feel like they're better off than they were a year ago with these two, that these two maybe fit what they're trying to do with Arthur Smith a little bit better? Do these guys deserve credit, or would you be curious to see what a healthy Najee Harris, obviously he gets the injury out in LA,
Right.
But it kind of makes it hard to have an apples-to-apples comparison. But just the type of runner we saw Najee Harris be, Would you like to see him in this backfield, or are you happy with what the Steelers have?
I'd like to see him. I do think that there's merits that this backfield gives you that him and Warren didn't as a duo. Well, like, I think in the short distances and in the power moments, Najee Harris would just be demonstrative. He would just bowl people over. And I think this is the best offensive line they've had since before Najee Harris was drafted. And I think that's the really big thing, is that both these guys are benefiting from a better offensive line to work with. And granted, this offensive line still has a ways to go, but it's still leaps and bounds better than what they had when Kendrick Green was a rookie, or when Dan Moore was at left tackle and Broderick Jones was playing it right. So I think there's a lot of room to grow there, but I think it's that it's different. It's a different style, because right now you have two speed backs basically who can make guys miss, catch the ball at the backfield, and be active at that. You had one guy last year, and then you had a power runner. So the question is, if you're the Steelers, do you want two of very similar style running backs, one who's a little bit more physical in Jaylen Warren, or do you want two physical running backs, but one's a home run hitter and one's like a wear you down type of back? That's the kind of style that I think that you had the past few years when you had Warren and Harris in the same backfield. Certainly right now, I think that the Steelers are seeing that they can work with either or of these two, so that gives them points to this crew. But I'll be curious to see, can this run game wear people down in late November, all throughout December, and then when they get to January, can that be a factor in some of their bigger games down the stretch? Because this team's been investing in its offensive line. They've been investing in trying to be able to own the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And when you do that, you need playmakers to take advantage of it. And if Warren and Gainwell can be guys who in the colder months can be big playmakers, then you're not going to question. It's like, yep, this is the better group right now. But one thing that Najee Harris did was he wore down opponents. And oftentimes he would take the brunt of defenses, so that when Jaylen Warren came in, they were worn down. They weren't looking for the run, and then he would pop off big runs. You don't have that right now. And Jaylen Warren's still doing a really good job. He's averaging 4.4 yards per carry. But I think the Steelers, they really like him, and I think they want him to be a long-term solution, which is why they're trying to not overload him with snaps right now. So to answer your question, I think this right now is better suited for what they're trying to do with this style of offense. But I also think that with this offensive line and the way it's grown, it would have been really nice to see Harris and Warren as a duo, because I think that could have been a unit that just wore defenses down to a nub with how physical they could have run together behind this offensive line.
Steelers are 3-point underdogs this week against the Bears, according to our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Make sure you check them out if you're looking to place a wager on the game. Chris, what's the role of the running game in an offense without Aaron Rodgers if it happens this week? And I guess maybe bigger picture, what's the role of the running backs in the passing game, whether it's Mason Rudolph or Aaron Rodgers? Should they be relying on them more, as we saw, Kenneth Gainwell have the big day? Is that going to be more dependent on whether it's Rudolph versus Rodgers? How do you see these guys interplaying with this quarterback situation?
I honestly see this as very similar, because right now you're not asking Aaron Rodgers to go out and make a whole bunch of elite level throws. You want him to take what's there, and when your playmakers are in space, get the ball to the playmakers. And Mason Rudolph did that in this game. He got the ball to Darnell Washington on a catch and run that converted 3rd and 17. He got the ball to Kenneth Gainwell for a touchdown, much like how Aaron Rodgers did in the first half. I think that there's a lot of similarities that can happen here. And again, you want to be able to run the ball, but this whole offense is at its best when you can't decide, you can't guess where they're going. Like, Antonio Brown was a guy that hey, the ball's coming there and you just couldn't stop it. And that's one thing. Le'Veon Bell was a guy with, hey, the Steelers want to run the ball here, but if they pull Pouncey into Castro ahead of Le'Veon Bell, just give them the first down because you're not stopping it. And those are nice to have. But right now, the Steelers, they don't have superstar players on offense that can take games over no matter what other teams do. They have to win with balance. They have to win by making you guess. And making you guess is trying to keep that balance where you don't know where it's going one way or the other. And that's where Mason Rudolph and Aaron Rodgers both have to do it. I will say Aaron Rodgers, I didn't think did a good job of that in the first game. Or not in the first half of this game. I thought he did in the first drive, but after that, I thought he was missing open guys, not seeing the field well. There were some wide open options that he just seemed to not be able to find. And then Mason Rudolph in the second half did find those guys. And so if I'm the Steelers, I keep a close eye on things, but I do think that I think that the way things are structured right now, either quarterback works for what they're doing, as long as they're making the good decisions.
Chris, I also wanted to get you out of the segment on this one. Kaleb Johnson's kind of been a bit player in this offense. I know you like that pick a lot, particularly for Arthur Smith's scheme with the zone runs and stuff when it was made. Has his lack of exposure been more about what Kenneth Gainwell and Jaylen Warren are doing well versus what he's doing wrong?
No, absolutely. I think that's exactly what it is, especially because the versatility that both of them provide. They can both run out the backfield, catch out the backfield, block in the backfield. And Kaleb Johnson can't do those last two things. He can run out the backfield really well, hit hard. I think he's gotten better at pass protection, but he still has to get sharper there. Jaylen Warren might be the best pass protecting running back in the NFL with the way that he hits people. Both him and Kenneth Gainwell are playmakers when they're running out of the backfield as pass catchers. Kaleb Johnson less so, and so I think that complete balance kind of puts Kaleb Johnson on a back burner. But I think the Steelers are fine with that. This gives him a year so he's not worn down. Eventually, you're hoping to get him in there next year or the year after for a bit more touches. But right now, this works, and I don't see the reason to shake it up too much because I think Warren and Gainwell are both really good players.
We're going to talk about the defensive backs in the second segment of the show, so stay tuned for that. Before we get into that, we want to thank another couple of sponsors. Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci are Pittsburgh's mesothelioma and asbestos attorneys, standing up for victims of mesothelioma and asbestos cancers with over 85 years of experience. Visit them online at sdklaw.com for a consultation. We also want to thank Olivia Numismatic Rarities. Have you got old gold jewelry or bullion collecting dust? Turn it into instant cash safely and securely at Olivia Numismatic Rarities right here in Pittsburgh's Shadyside neighborhood. Gold prices are at historic highs, and ONR pays top dollar for your unwanted gold, silver, and coins. Stop by their Shadyside Gallery at 5833 Ellsworth Avenue or visit onrcoins.com to learn more. That's onrcoins.com or call 412-900-COIN today. Second segment here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm Adam Bittner, talking to Christopher Carter about Steelers defensive backs. Chris, I want to start with something that stood out to me when I was doing my weekly PFF grades post over on Post-Gazette.com. I know you do the grades as well. You graded Joey Porter this week. It was this stat that jumped off the page at me. He is holding opponents below 50% completion percentages when targeted this season. Yep. He hasn't allowed a completed pass in the last 2 weeks against the Chargers and Bengals. That's pretty good stuff. And I think he's got this reputation because of the penalties, Chris, that he stinks. He's not living up to his potential. He's too handsy. He's not good enough to be a number one. I look at that, Chris. I say that's what he did well at Penn State. That's exactly how he profiled there. We've seen it translate in the pros at different points, maybe a little less so last year. But once he's gotten his feet under him after the injury this year, he looks like the guy that we kind of expected him to be. Is he that like Darrelle Revis shutdown type? Probably not. Whoa. Right, exactly. But sometimes I think that's the expectations people have for corners for the Steelers. When they never live up to that, they get, the Steelers can't develop a corner. I think that this is like a B+ situation with him, Chris. No, he's not everything people wanted him to be, but those are really good numbers on an analytics level that if you're churning them out over the course of a 17-game season, that's a lot of value.
It is. Right now, of the Steelers defensive backs, he is allowing a passer rating of 51.3 when the ball comes his way. That's the best on the team. Next best is James Pierre at 51.7. And the thing about Joey Porter is he's matching up with number ones a lot in this defense, and he's doing so well. And you're right. The penalties, that kind of put a mire on his situation. He wasn't, it wasn't the best look when he was getting toasted with those. But a lot of those times I felt like a lot of them were ticky-tack. A lot of them were, okay, you just got caught in this situation. Just try to avoid this so that they can't do this call, but you were in position. Your footwork was correct. Your placement was correct. Your understanding of the route concept and how to counter it was correct. You got to fix that up. And then between that and just some of the boneheaded mistakes that I thought were just him getting lost in scheme like he did against the Packers a few times. Those things have been erased from his game in the last 3 weeks. Because even when we go back 3 games ago to the Colts game, he got an interception in that game. And I think I said it in my grades. I think he's playing at a very high level. I gave him a 2-star grade out of 3 stars, particularly because he just didn't have that turnover worthy play or that turnover play that Kyle Duggar had. But at the same time, if he does play like the rest of, if this is a sign that he's going to play around this level the rest of the way, the Steelers got them a starting cornerback. Like this guy, he was locking down Jamar Chase and T. Higgins in this game. I mean, in the frame of, I think he was targeted 3 times when he was guarding those guys. None of those were completed, and that's a big testament to him. And yeah, I wouldn't say Darrelle Revis, but I'd say another guy who wore 24, and maybe Ike Taylor. And if he's Ike Taylor, that's a pretty good Ike Taylor with maybe some better hands. That's a pretty good cornerback situation you got there for the Steelers. And granted, Ike was a 4th round pick and worked out. But if you got your starting cornerback for the next 5 to 8 years, man, you did your job in that draft. And so Joey Porter Jr. playing at a high level deserves the praise. Glad he's starting to get it. And I think that he's a really big piece to the puzzle of what the Steelers need in the future.
How has he benefited or not from the changes they've made in the secondary over these last 3 weeks? Because it's clicked for a lot of guys in that period of time. Is there something that stands out about how they've changed how they're deploying him because of the personnel they have, or just because they're trying to use him differently? What are you seeing on that front?
I've noted this a lot on tape, but like the switch to using 2 safeties, which by the way, they did over 70% of the time in this last game. They were doing a lot of 1 high safety looks to start the year. That switch to the way they're using 2 safety shells is allowing the Steelers cornerbacks to be more aggressive underneath and not have to worry about getting beat over the top for something because they know they have that safety help. And it's not always every play, but I see Joey Porter Jr. just being more confident, more sound, because he knew, hey, you know what, if I get beat here, it's fine. I got that guy behind me. And so I think that's playing a big role, and it's helping him be a more aggressive version of himself that doesn't need to be even overly aggressive to the point that he's committing penalties.
Let's talk about some of the other guys in the secondary. Chris, what's the staying power of James Pierre, Brandin Echols, and Kyle Duggar? Because I think they were all, kind of acquisitions that people just were easy to gloss over, just people viewed as roster churn on some level or another. Kyle Duggar came with that pedigree. I think he was a 2nd-round pick, but you traded a 6th-round pick for him. So I think there was a bunch of kind of meh when the Steelers made that deal. So do any of the 3 have long-term futures in Pittsburgh? Obviously, you have a guy like Joey Porter Jr. on one side of the field potentially for the next handful of years. Jalen Ramsey's not necessarily going anywhere because of his contract. Do you think these guys have a chance to play their way into semi-permanent roster spots here, or are they just on some hot streaks?
Maybe Duggar, because I think that he's playing safety at a very smart level and he's providing stability, as Mike Tomlin quoted on that after the game. I think that's a big part of what the Steelers need, is they needed stability at the safety position. I'd like to say James Pierre, but according to Mike Tomlin, Darius Slay is going to be starting again this week. So much for that. I think that there's some staying power there if they believe in it. But I think by and large, this secondary went through schematic changes and then personnel changes and is now playing at its best right now. And I think that they're seeing that potential starting to blossom. And I think that's a good thing for the Steelers to have, because the secondary was supposed to be a strength for the team. It was then a weakness for the team through about 2 months, and then November hits, and then all of a sudden they're figuring it out. They're putting it together, and I think that that's where maybe this change is allowing them to just be themselves a little bit more, be more aggressive, and then across the board you're getting help from different positions. So I think it's a lot of good things.
Let's finish up this segment here, Chris. What is Jalen Ramsey bringing to the safety spot that's different than what they had earlier in the season? You mentioned the 2 safety looks versus the one that they were doing early on. Is it that simple, or is he bringing different things to the table than that group was? And I'll throw in a 1B question here. What's he doing differently than Minkah Fitzpatrick was a year ago in kind of a similar spot as the highly paid safety guy in this defense?
So your first question, what's he doing differently than the other safeties this year? He's being accountable. you're not seeing his part of the field be open. You're seeing him locked in on his assignments. And I think he's helping keeping other people locked in on their assignments. I think that's something that's underrated that Jalen Ramsey's really doing right now. And it's an underrated part of what safeties do in general. I thought there were a lot of times where Minkah Fitzpatrick really held the Steelers defense together, even when he wasn't making the splash plays. He was just making the necessary plays and communicating and keeping things at a high level. And Minkah Fitzpatrick deserved credit for that. So similarly, got to give Jalen Ramsey credit for that kind of stuff. He with him back there, they're on the same page. They're playing fast. They're hitting hard, and they're doing some good stuff there. So I'm encouraged by that. As far as the long term and thinking about Jalen Ramsey playing at safety and what he does versus what Minkah did, I think Minkah was more of that one high safety that could still go sideline to sideline. But, as a cover two safety, it's different roles. You're asked to do less. And I think that's fine. But you're getting to cover half the field, and that's kind of what you're signing up to do. And so I think Jalen Ramsey's fit into that role very well. I think he understands where he's supposed to go. I think he communicates at a high level, and having a guy back there that can communicate with both the CBs and the safeties can be an asset. And I think that's certainly something that works in his favor.
Well, we'll continue to monitor how that situation plays out this week against Kaleb Williams and the Bears. Not the automatic win. I think a lot of people thought they'd be on the schedule. They're going to be a tough challenge for this secondary. So make sure you subscribe to this channel. We got a lot more coming your way this week. Chris will be back later in the week with Brian with the weekend edition. I'll be back with Paul Zeiss Friday and then Sunday after the game for the post-game show. So subscribe to the channel for all that. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Help us out in the YouTube algorithm, and please consider checking out our written coverage at post-gazette.com. That always helps us continue to bring this coverage to you. So head over to our website soon. Otherwise, we will talk to you again next week.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.